The people there are great. They're really friendly. They love music. They love to talk and sing and dance. People are listening to music 24/7. People are happy there. People are more happy because the weather's usually good, in the Caribbean. They've got lots of beautiful things to see all the time. You don't have months like in America. You might be living in Iowa and it's, dark and gray and snowy and cold for 4 or 5 months. But there it's always sunshiny. People are always upbeat. As long as they've got their rice and beans and chicken and everything's cool. So they're happy. People are very resourceful. They don't have a whole lot of money to buy things, and so they kind of make things up. And I remember one time I was hopping into a taxi and I was in the front seat. The taxi was completely full. And I noticed that there was this big Mazola canister of, I thought was oil. And I kind of asked the taxi driver, said, "What is this?" And he says, "That's our gas tank." And I said, "What?" So that was the gas tank in the Mazola oil bottle. It was kind of scary, so I didn't want to ever have that happen again, but that was a weird experience. My favorite foods in the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico, they're pretty much the same. They eat rice and beans with chicken pretty much every day. They'll have some cabbage salad with tomato, vinegar, pepper, and that's pretty much what they eat a lot. The best pork in the world is in Puerto Rico, and they call it lechon, and it's roasted pork. They roast it outside for hours, I think a couple days. The meat just drips off the bones, and they eat every part of it. The ears and the skin turns into kind of a crunchy potato chip type of texture, and it's really yummy to eat. And the whole part of the body and the way they season it, it's just amazing. And in Puerto Rico, they call it lechon. I think the craziest food, especially when it's really hot, is when they feed you what they call morcilla. And morcilla is a blood sausage. They take an intestine and they fill it with blood and rice and spices, and they let it coagulate. It turns into a hard sausage, and then they fry it. And it's a black looking sausage, and it doesn't look real good. It tastes all right, but I'm not into eating blood sausage. They eat meat, rice, beans, chicken, pork, ham. Not a lot of beef. Chicken's the main thing. They call it pollo guisado, kind of chicken pot flavored chicken. It's really good. They eat a lot of carbohydrates. They eat potatoes, what they call yuca, which is a root plant. In English, you'd say cassava. They eat plátanos, which are plantains. Everything's fried. Fried food is better, so hey, it tastes really good. In the Dominican Republic, one of their best drinks is what they call morir soñando. So that's die laughing, smiling. And what it is, it's orange juice mixed with condensed milk. And then they shake it up and put ice in it, and it's a pretty refreshing drink. I've never had that before. And then they drink a drink called malta, which is made out of molasses. They brew it, and they have the alcohol version and the non-alcohol version, and it's really tasty. I like it. It's a very malty, molasses kind of sweet flavor. So those are good. And then they drink a lot of in Puerto Rico, they call it coquito, which is eggnog, and they throw a lot of rum in it. In Dominican Republic, they don't call it coquito, they call it ponche navideño, or something like that. Anything that's a punch, a mixed drink, they call it ponche. And so it's kind of funny how they use punch and turn it into Spanish Dominican. Well, when I was a missionary, I was serving in Puerto Rico first. I was the last missionary transferred from Puerto Rico to Dominican Republic. And it was in the month of November, just before Thanksgiving, right around this time, about 40 years ago. And as I was coming to the apartment, I noticed there was this big turkey lying on the ground. And I'm thinking, what the heck is that? And my companion said, "Oh yeah, that's our turkey we're going to eat for Thanksgiving." I said, how are you going to cook it? And he goes, "Oh, well, the maid's going to go take it down to the bakery and cook it," because that was the biggest oven in town. Nobody cooks with ovens there. They use charcoal and they use these propane type of cooking devices. But nobody had ovens or anything like stovetops. So anyways, the maid cleaned it, and I got to see a turkey. It was crazy to see that. And they had to cook it in the only bakery in town, because that was the only big oven that could fit a turkey in. Well, the thing that I admire most about Dominicans and Puerto Ricans is their ability to smile. And they have lots of hardships there in the Dominican Republic. They've had, tough times, people surviving, some of the living conditions that they have, and they just seem to, get along and make the best of what they have. Puerto Rico's a little bit different. They're about 20 years more advanced than they were in the Dominican Republic. They were a little less humble, but very friendly. Everybody's always willing to help with anything that you might need. So both cultures are pretty close, except the economies are a little bit different. I know today it's a little bit different than it was 40 years ago, but the Puerto Ricans and Dominicans have always been competitive. Who's the better baseball teams, Dominicans or Puerto Ricans. So that's been a big question over the years. The biggest culture shock was humidity, heat. That's not so much a culture shock, but after being in the humidity and the heat, it kind of wears on you, and so it mellows you out. So you're like, tomorrow, I'll do it tomorrow. And that's kind of how the culture is. Who cares? We'll do it tomorrow. They're not let's get it done today. They kind of let things slide a little bit. And so when somebody said, yeah, I'll do it tomorrow, you meant, it'll happen next week or something to that effect. So that was something to get used to culturally. People listen to music all the time and they're dancing, and sometimes some of the merengue music or the salsa music that you're hearing, you're like, I can't take it anymore. I want to hear some Led Zeppelin or something, but it was fun. The cost of living definitely in Dominican Republic is less than it is in Puerto Rico. It's more expensive in Puerto Rico. But, when you live in the country, I was in houses that didn't even have flooring. It was a hard mud floor and tin roofs. And then the other houses were a little more upscale. They were concrete cinder block houses with tin roofs. And then you got into the other more affluent areas where they had houses just like everywhere else, every amenity, running water, hot water. Back in the day in Dominican Republic, they didn't have sewer systems. And so what you would have to do to have clean water is you'd have this big, huge water tank in the ground in front of your house, and then have a water truck fill it up. And that was your running water, and then you'd use that water, and then they'd fill it up again next month. And they do that all over the world in some places because they don't have sewer systems. They use septic tanks, for their sewer and things like that. So you take for granted here living in the U.S. having, nice sewer systems and nice fresh water, whereas in the Dominican Republic, it's not so much. And then in Puerto Rico's just like America. They've got great water, great infrastructure, great highways. They got the best roads in the Caribbean. So Puerto Rico is really good with that. But again, they do have bad roads in Puerto Rico, but compared to everywhere else in the Caribbean, they're pretty good. The transportation in Puerto Rico, they used to have a lot of guaguas. That's what they called a taxi, a guagua. And they'd have a little van, and you'd meet at this stop, and it would take you to different places. That was pretty much the public transportation about 40 years ago. Then Uber, now they've got Uber in Puerto Rico, so that works. Dominican Republic, they had a transportation. They had taxis. It was pretty cheap, 35 cents to go here and go there in downtown Santo Domingo. But pretty much everybody in the smaller villages, smaller towns walked or rode bikes, or they had these little Honda motor scooters that they would ride, and they had pickup trucks where people would jam pack in a pickup truck and they'd go places and things like that. That was back 40 years ago. Things are a little bit different now, I imagine. In Puerto Rico, they got everything that we have. They got great highways, great cars. It's America, really much. Puerto Rico is America. They've got U.S. post offices, they've got Costco, they've got Walmart, Sam's Club, wonderful malls, great roads, amazing infrastructure. Again, it's probably not where it needs to be after the hurricane, but they're starting from scratch. I've got some good friends that live down there, and I keep in touch with him about what the infrastructure is like and how they're improving things, but they're getting everything brand new built. So Puerto Rico will be one of the best places in the world to live soon. Spanish in the Caribbean is interesting. I learned Spanish, started at the age of 6 and took a class all the way to high school, and then I got called on a mission to serve in the Caribbean. English and Spanish, you've got different accents. So everybody speaks Spanish and they all have different slang words. But in the Caribbean, they kind of don't pronounce their S's and they butcher up words sometimes, if I were to say it that way. Like, for example, in Spain, they'd say, ¿Cómo estás? In Puerto Rico or Dominican, they'd say, ¿Cómo tú estás? They wouldn't say, ¿Cómo estás? They say, ¿Cómo tú estás? ¿Cómo va la cosa? And they don't pronounce their S's. ¿Cómo van las cosas? I think it has a lot to do with the influence of, the African and people speaking different languages and mixing English and Spanish and that whole sound together. So it's pretty unique, and it takes some getting used to, especially their music. When you're listening to it, you're kind of going, what the heck is that guy saying? I can't understand anything. But then after you've heard it 100 times and you go, oh, okay, he's saying this, okay. And so anyway, it's kind of like listening to Michael Jackson the first time. You can't understand what he says. Then after about the 100th time singing Billie Jean, you go, oh, he's talking about, oh, okay. Dominicans, they kind of sing when they talk a little bit. Everybody in the Caribbean, you have Cubans, Puerto Ricans, and Dominicans, and there's this hierarchy. And so it starts with the Cubans they think they're up here, and then the Puerto Ricans and the Dominicans, and then the Haitians, and so they kind of make fun of each other, and Puerto Ricans have a different way of saying things, and so do Dominicans. So it'd be kind of like comparing somebody from Southern California to New York. Different accents, and they might use different words and different things. And Spanish is Spanish. You just have to get used to hearing, people talk. It's music to my ears when I hear a Puerto Rican or a Dominican speak. I just go, I can hear somebody in a Latin store, supermarket, and I'm going, you're a Dominican. You just said más o menos instead of más o menos. Takes me back. It's just home, to hear those accents. And Puerto Ricans have a unique way of saying the word verde, V-E-R-D-E, verde, they say verde. Or instead of saying verdad, they say verdad. And so they have these little things, verdad, verde, fajardo, and you go, oh, I love it when they say that. The crazy thing about the Latin American culture is every country has their own slang, and one word in one country might mean something bad and in another country might mean something good. So as I've traveled around the world, I've worked in Colombia and Central America, the Caribbean, South America. I've had to be careful at saying certain things, One word in one country is good, the other word you don't use. Well, in the Caribbean and in the Latin world, they have basically 3 weeks of vacation. So you've got the Christmas week, they celebrate Christmas, and then the week after, they celebrate New Year's, and then the week after, it's Dia de los Reyes, it's Day of the Kings. Everything closes down for 3 weeks. You can't get anything done for 3 weeks in Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic. Nobody's around. So you got Christmas, Santa Claus, and everybody goes to Mass at night on Christmas Eve. It's a very big tradition down there. A lot of great memories. They make a lot of good food. One of the things they make during Christmas time is what they call a tamal or a pastel. It's a crushed up, they use a masa of a plátano, a plantain, or they use it of a yuca, and then they put meat inside of this mass. It's kind of like a Mexican tamale, but they don't make it out of corn. It's made out of plátanos. And then they put ham and Spanish olives in it, and then they steam it in banana leaves, and it's really good, and it just tastes amazing. So they make a lot of those during the Christmas time, so they call them pastel or tamal. Things have changed. I lived in Puerto Rico recently, about 5 years ago. I lived there for about 3 years, and things had changed a lot since I first got there back in 1979 as a missionary. Things have changed a lot in both places. There was only one little tiny mall in the Dominican Republic when I was there. Now they've got some massive malls. They've got 3 or 4 of them in Santo Domingo, and they've got their road infrastructure's gotten better. They've got some public transportation where they've got a subway. And so some of those things have really changed. The quality of life has gotten a lot better. Things are still pretty poor. I know crime in the Dominican Republic. People get killed for having an iPhone, if you're at the wrong place at the wrong time, somebody will kill you for an iPhone. In Puerto Rico, not so much because everybody has an iPhone. Culturally speaking, they're very awesome cultures. The Puerto Ricans and Dominicans are very competitive with each other, but they're really, it's beautiful. The most gorgeous people in the world, I remember seeing a family for the first time when I was in the Dominican Republic, and you had a mother that was more European looking, father that was black, and the children had a mix. The kid was black with blue eyes, his sister was blonde with brown eyes, and they were brothers and sisters from the same mom and dad, and you're like, how could that happen? But over the years, I guess, this is the most gorgeous people. You can't even imagine how pretty it is to see these people. Abrazos a todos las personas, mis amigos que viven en Santo Domingo, que viven en Puerto Rico, los boricuas. Feliz Navidad, que tengan un año próspero y felicidad y todo eso. Me encanta la cultura del Caribe, de las personas allá. Entonces, Abrazos, mando amor a todos ustedes y que tengan un buen año que viene mejor que este año, okay? Just want to wish everybody out there, love everybody. You guys live in an amazing part of the world. Thanks for sharing everything that you have, your food, your culture, some of the best baseball players that ever played. My favorite of all time, Roberto Clemente, man. He was my hero as a kid. So, good times. Love you. Have a great one. Nos vemos.